Hi guys, Oliver here. While I'm working here on some images, I have that lovely view out of this window. Oh wait, you can't see it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is what I see out of my office window. There's that little hill with a rapeseed field and a few trees on top. And today we have this beautiful cloud cover. The clouds are moving slowly and yeah, overall it's just a beautiful day. Well, now you know what I'm talking about, and it's a lovely scene, and it really inspires the landscape photographer in me to do something more landscape related. I do not really think there is a shot in it because it's private land and I would have to walk into the field, and I do not really want to risk to get shot by the farmer. You never know. However, you may have noticed that little roof, and if I can get my kit up there, I might be able to create a nice time-lapse of the clouds moving over the scene while at the same time providing light and shadow on the yellow of the rapeseed field. And why not at the same time let me show you how I create my time-lapses, shall we? For ease of access reasons, I'm grabbing the stuff and put it here on the windowsill, and then I'd see if I can get access from around there. I'll be back in a second. Yeah, I made it up on my roof and set up my equipment. What I have, my trusted Gitzo tripod, and because we're doing a time-lapse today, I chose my Canon 7D Mark II. The reason for that is it has a built-in interval timer, and yeah, that makes it just a little easier for me. If your camera doesn't have that, and for example my 5D doesn't have that built in, you need one of these. It's an external timer, and they don't cost the world, and they're pretty easy to set up. We don't need a delay, we don't need the length because we determine it in camera, but we're just setting up here the interval we need. In our case, let's say, yeah, they're moving slow, something like 6 seconds will be good. Set it and fire and forget. As I said, yeah, I got it from the online shop named after the big river, and yeah, it cost about 12 quid I think, plus batteries. So, put that aside, and the first thing we need to do from my roof view here is obviously finding a composition. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, we're putting on my filter holder. It's my old Lee 100 system with the polarizer attached already. That is on, and see how much of polarization we need. Yeah, I think I want to have it partially dialed in, like this. And in the next step, yeah, do we need to darken the sky? I think a little. And because I want to get as much right in camera as possible, I've taken a graduated filter, taken a 2-stop hard grad. So let's put it in. I should be happy. And now let's do our metering. We are here at an 80th of a second, f7.1. That is not enough for what I want to do. Today the clouds are moving very slow, so I'm guessing I'm taking an interval of, let's say, 6 seconds between two images. But to make that a little smoother, I want to also take a long exposure of every single shot. In that case, the clouds already have a little movement in the single slides, and that makes it just way more smooth in the final image, in the final time-lapse. Alright, so to achieve that, taking my little stopper here, it's a 6-stop neutral density filter, and we're in manual mode, going into live view, and see what we have. Let's say I'm stopping it down to have everything sharp. Bringing the histogram in. Setting up the scene at f9 and 2.5 seconds. So I show you the histogram on the back of my camera here. This is how the scenery will look like. You see the histogram. It's a little on the bright. We got to be very careful. It is right now, what time is it? 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And the light will be less, but I still want to have it in manual mode, because as you see, there is clouds with shadow on the fields, and then there isn't. So we have 2.5 seconds per shot, f9, and this is it. The next thing we're going to do is, I said the Canon does have a built-in intervalometer, and we're going to use that. I'm pressing the menu button, and then we are in the main menu. It is here, the interval timer is right now disabled. I enable it, but pressing the info button, and let's say we want to have 6 seconds. Yep, that should be sufficient. Confirm. Press OK, and all we have to do is press the shutter. Taking the first image. It won't show a preview in that mode, but you see the LED on the bottom right. And if you count the time, every 6 seconds it will now take a shot at the duration of 2.5 seconds, which is exactly as we set it up. So I let it run for at least 2 hours, 2.5 hours maybe, just to get some duration. And after that I will be back when we are transferring the images on the computer, and I'm going to show you how we are going to make a time-lapse out of single files. Okay, I let the setup out there for a good 2 hours, and now I have retrieved everything and transferred the data on the computer. Well, not all the data, because initially I wanted to show you how I compose the scene and what happens when I put the filters in, but due to a fatal error that happened right between my ears, I've lost that footage. Anyway, we leave that for an in-depth how to use filter tutorial another time. Today we're focusing on the time-lapse. Okay, a bit of maths first. So for, as I say, good 2 hours I left the camera out there. When I'm taking one single image every 6 seconds, that means I'm having 10 images per minute. So we're having 600 images in an hour. A time-lapse now is nothing else than a movie. And when I create a movie with 25 frames per second, which is my standard frame rate, then out of the footage of 1 hour, we're getting 24 seconds of video clip for a time-lapse. Well, if you leave it for 2 hours, then we double that and we would end up with 48 seconds. I ended up with good 1300 images, and because I was shooting into sunset, or was trying to shoot into sunset, which didn't really happen, I'm not going to use all of that material. I do, however, process everything, and in the final clip I may trim the beginning, may trim the end. We're going to see how that works later at the end. But before we start creating a time-lapse, we need to do a tiny little bit of work in Lightroom. We're not using Photoshop today, Lightroom only. And yeah, first let's have a look what we have, okay? These are the photos, and as you see, the scenery started very bright. When I then go through, we have, yeah, right at the beginning here, there are darker moments where everything was in shadow. Getting right in the middle, we are losing the light and the entire scenery is getting darker until at the very end I think it's really too dark. So when we are processing everything, we have to bear in mind that the scenery is getting darker at the end, so not reducing too much of the brightness at the beginning. And there isn't too much work to do. We're enabling the profile correction. There isn't really any chromatic aberration, so we're leaving that as it is. As I said, we don't want to have it too dark at the beginning, so we're not changing anything in the exposure. Maybe adding a little contrast, just slightly, taking some of the highlights out, maybe lift the shadows a little, and that helps for later. Finding our white point, okay, reducing it a little in that area, doing the same for the blacks, good, I'm happy with that. Adding a bit of texture may help, but the clarity is counterproductive here, so I'm even taking the clarity slider back, bit of dehaze. The color, because we really want to make these colors pop and vibrant, but careful, don't overdo, just a little bit. The same here for the curves, the brights in and the darks out, not too much, lifting the shadows even a little more and not changing really anything in the colors. A bit of noise reduction just for colors as well. How does it look like? Yeah, I think we can live with that. Bear in mind we're creating a video at the end, and that's pretty much it. We don't need to have any more. But now there is that beautiful function in Lightroom. We are selecting all the images from beginning to end, clicking on sync, making sure that we're checking all, and synchronize. Yeah, the synchronization will give you the first chance for having a little break, because depending on the computer speed, that may take a while, and I may get myself a coffee. Okay, we are done. So we have now transferred all the modifications we made in Lightroom, which wasn't too much anyway, but we've synchronized it throughout the entire range. And you can see here at the end the clouds were disappearing, it's getting darker, lost the light, and when I was hoping for colors that didn't really happen, so I may trim that off anyway. But still, the files, the way they are not really usable. Now we need to export them. The way I export them is in a JPEG format. Now we're thinking about the resolution of the time-lapse you want to create. I only want to do that in a full HD, which means 1920 by 1080 pixel, in a separate folder. We export it as JPEG, just give it a slight compression, and we do resize them to fit. What I'm choosing here is that 1920 is my standard resolution for a time-lapse, but I make it slightly larger. The reason for that is it gives me a little space to create a little panning effect throughout the creation of a time-lapse. So let's say 2200 pixel alongside resolution 72 dpi. That'll be fine. We sharpen for screen. Nothing special, obviously no watermarking and other rubbish here. And then we export. Good. This is now where it really takes a long time, and it gives you some time to reflect that you are actually creating a vast amount of data. Just think about it. I have 1300 images, and every one is between 20-22 megabyte of size. So you need to have some disk space. That data needs to be handled, and now that data needs to be processed. So when the sync process was rather quick, now the export, at least on my machine, takes really some time. And just let the computer do what it's supposed to do, and I'll be back after the export with the creation of the time-lapse. Okay, quite some time later, and a good amount of disk space less available on my hard disk, Lightroom has finally done its job and exported everything. A side note here, of course you can skip that entire process, and you can shoot JPEGs and use them straight out of camera. Not a problem at all. The reason why I do that extra step and why I go that extra mile is because I always want to keep control over what I'm doing. So maybe the white balance went wrong and I need to change that. Always easier to do it in a RAW file. Maybe I want to take one image out of the entire series and process it to publish, maybe to print even, then I'm always happy when I have a RAW file available. But you don't need to do that. As I said, you can skip everything, can skip the entire process and jump straight into the JPEGs. So at this point we do not need Lightroom anymore, because we have everything in a folder. As you see here, I have my RAW files. My subfolder here are the single JPEGs. And the next task now is to put them together into a time-lapse. Now, whether you do it in a specialist program like Time-Lapse Assembler, if you use Movie Maker on a PC or on a Macintosh, it comes with iMovie, they all can do that. Even Photoshop can create time-lapse videos out of single images. But I am used to the software I'm using to produce my videos with, which is DaVinci Resolve. So I've created a new project. My settings, I just want to have it in a full HD 1920 by 1080 pixel, and I set my timeline frame rate to 25 frames per second. That's pretty much it. So now we need to have the images on the media pool here. So I import the images. Okay, here's my folder. Subfolder Lightroom. I select them all and import them. Okay, what we have here, I'll make that a little larger for you. It directly shows me it's all the images put together in a single clip. So I move them into my timeline and can play that here. Can also move that here, and you see this is what happens. This is the entire magic. It's always fascinating for me to see when clouds are forming and disappearing, which is something we see every day but we don't recognize it just because we compress the time. All we need to do here is now export it. To do so, I click on Deliver in the software, choose my standard YouTube format, change it to MP4. That's only the reason because I'm also using an Android phone and that struggles a bit with the movie format. Leave the rest as it is, give it a name and a location where to save it, add it to the render queue and do the render job. Should be done in less than a minute. With the final result, which I'll show you in a second, once that is done, you can do whatever you want. You can present it as a single time-lapse video. In that case, I would put some music just underneath it, but because I want to embed that time-lapse video into the video you're right now watching, I'm not putting the music underneath yet. I do that in the final production. At this point, I admit I did pretty much the same before I even started recording. So I have two time lapses of the same field, slightly different angle at two different times of the day, and I will see what I can put together, what I can squeeze out of it without boring you to death. Just another few seconds and our result is done. Yeah, kind of a creative play around with it. But as promised, here is the result and I'll be back afterwards. I think for a landscape time-lapse video where I did not go to a fancy location, where I didn't even leave my home, that wasn't too shabby. Hope you agree. A word to the music. Your choice of music has a huge impact to the message you want to convey. Let's say a time-lapse video of a landscape where the clouds are moving slowly over, something different than an industrial complex with steaming chimneys or a busy traffic scene. So experiment and see what music suits your time-lapse. Well, our tastes are all different, obviously. A word to the shooting interval. For the scene you've seen here, I chose a 6-second interval, which means one image every 6 seconds. That's because the clouds were really moving slowly. If the wind is driving them clouds fast over the landscape, I'm going down to 3, maybe 2 seconds even, or a traffic scene maybe going even faster, down to 1 second. While the opposite would be, for example, a flower slowly opening, going down to 20 or 30-second interval, or even slower. So you have to think about that before you choose your interval, because this is something you cannot change. However, you can slightly influence that with the frame rate. I told you I'm choosing a frame rate of 25 frames per second for my videos here, but you're not bound to that. You can choose 30 seconds, 60 seconds even. The more frames per second you put in, the more compressed that video will be. And I mean, time-lapse videos are all about compression of time. That's where the fascination is in. One important thing. Normally, I am not a big fan of the phrase, you must shoot in manual mode. No, not at all. For example, most of my landscape images are taken or created in aperture priority. But when it comes to time lapses, I highly and strongly recommend shooting everything in manual mode. Even set the white balance in manual. The reason for that is, as you've seen, sometimes we have light and shadow changing quickly over the landscape. If you now have a field in the foreground with shadow and light, while in the sky isn't much movement or a change in the light, then every automatic mode of your camera will try to some sort of compensate that. And that gives a really weird effect. If you set up your camera in manual mode, and that won't change. The opposite is the case. If the scene is getting darker because a big massive cloud is in front of the sun, and that moves away and the sun's coming out again, you really make that effect visible. So yes, when it comes to time lapses, please shoot in manual mode. As you've seen, I shoot in RAW. You don't have to. The easy and convenient way would be JPEG, but I want to stay in control. That's why I shoot RAW. I'll leave that totally with you. Maybe you want to shoot both. Try with JPEG. If that doesn't work out and you need to make corrections, use the RAWs. So plenty of opportunities here. And now we're at the end of today's video. I hope you got inspired to take your own time-lapse videos. As always, leave me a comment and a like would be much appreciated. Don't forget to hit subscribe down there if you haven't done already. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here again soon.